Welcome to Confessions by Banana Ketchup. After a late night shift at the bar. Okay, so this is a story my mom told me when I was a teenager. I've told friends and every one of us get flashbacks to thinking about it when lying in the dark or alone. Just really ass-pants scary. I don't know if you guys will agree. My mom worked in a social club as a barmaid in the 80s and 90s. She always remembers it as a great place, friendly with the regulars and the other staff. One of the other staff members, who we'll call Tom, is the brother of family friend who we'll call Jim. My mom had been friends with this family for decades. They kind of lost touch, so I didn't meet Jim until I was about 16. After hearing this story a few times from my mom when I was younger, years later, Jim told me it independently out of the blue. You need to understand that this family are hard working class family. Not the sort of people to even believe in the paranormal, let alone go around making up ghost stories. Back to the story. In the bar where my mom worked pulling pints, Tom worked as a doorman, bouncer. They obviously worked late nights, and therefore at the end of the night, the bar would pay for taxis home for the staff to make sure they got home safely. One night, my mom and Tom shared a taxi home, I think with another staff member too. Tom was dropped off first, then the other staff member, because my mom lived in a cottage outside the city. She was always last to get home. Tom had been dropped off at a friend's house instead of his own. His friend was a bouncer too at another bar who'd just finished his shift a while earlier, so they'd planned to just hang out after their respective shifts. The next day, my mom was back in work and Tom came in for his shift. He came and sat down at the bar in front of my mom and ordered a whiskey. I think licensing laws were a bit more lax in those days because my mom says it wasn't uncommon for them to all have a few drinks on shift. She started chatting to him as normal and she said he seemed really quiet and didn't look as if he had much sleep. After some coaxing, he told her that something had happened. The story his brother Jim had told me 20 odd years later. After his shift, Tom had gone up the lift in the multi-story to his friend's flat, knocked on the door and waited. A few moments later, his friend, whose name I can't remember, so we'll call him Steve, came to the door and invited Tom inside. They walked into the house and Steve asked Tom if he fancied a coffee, which he accepted. Steve told him to grab a seat in the living room while he made their drinks. Tom took off his coat and hung it up at the door as Steve headed into the kitchen. Tom then walked up the hall and into the living room where he saw that Steve's neighbor and her daughter were already sat watching television. Tom greeted them and the mother turned and smiled to acknowledge him. He sat down and started making small talk, as he'd never met these girls before and they weren't exactly the most chatty, just nodding and smiling. After not getting much of response, Tom just sat with them and watched TV. After a minute or so, the woman and her daughter stood up out of their chairs and got on their hands and knees and started army crawling along the floor around the room. Perplexed Tom stood and walked into the kitchen and said to Steve something along the lines of, "What the duck are they doing? Have they been drinking?" To which Steve replied, "Thank God, you can see them too." Tom had obviously freaked out and went back into the living room to see that they were both gone. Apparently, this was a regular occurrence for Steve, who thought he was going mad and had been hallucinating. Until then, he was the only one who had seen them, and they repeated the same actions every night. After a bit of digging, they found out that there had been a fire some years before in that flat where a woman and her daughter had died. Steve wasn't too disturbed apparently and just got used to them, and sometimes chatted away to them as he didn't feel threatened, which is cute, I guess. This story gives me absolute goosebumps every time it's told, and I've got them now from writing it down. My mom told me another really weird supernatural story from when she worked there, but I'll do a separate post for that if you guys want to hear. Thank you MXY, the author. I think there is a mimic in my house, but it's mimicking me. I have experienced paranormal things since I was a child. I have always been open and receptive to paranormal things, and possibly to a fault. When I started dating my now husband, I would tell him all sorts of stories of things that I experienced through my childhood and teenage years. He has always been fascinated by the paranormal, and my stories always intrigued him, but he never experienced anything himself until we moved in together. I've always been convinced that I had a clinger spirit that has attached to me somewhere in life and just stayed along for the ride. We've lived in different locations and always experienced the same things at each home. It was never anything malicious, and I always joked that my Casper was just doing things to say hi and let me know he's there. My husband just laughed it off because there was never a real issue and everything seemed harmless and playful. We have walked into our offices with our desk chairs spinning when no one was in the room. We have smart TVs and they all rotate, turning on in the middle of the night as if someone is trying to watch TV, scrolling through the apps to select Netflix or Hulu. I've also seen it just run through the different HDMI options. Items that have specific locations, like keys, will end up in random places, like under the kitchen sink or in a sock drawer. We shut our closet doors at night, and we will wake up with them wide open. I can't sleep if there is even a silver of light showing in my room, and any light will wake me from a dead sleep. I wake up to the bathroom light switching on quite often, which requires me to get out of bed and turn it off so I can go back to sleep. My husband's computer powers on by itself, and it's a big tower with a power button that takes a little effort to push. We've become used to those things, but lately something else has started, and I think it's mimicking me. Lately, when I'm downstairs and my husband is in his office upstairs, he will walk to the landing of our stairwell and ask me if I call his name. Usually, if I need something or have a question for him, I will just call his cell if I'm too lazy to run upstairs or if I'm in the middle of cooking and can't leave the stove. Even when I'm laying down in bed and he's on his computer in the same room, he will pull off his headphones and ask me what I need. For a while, I was thinking, am I losing my mind? Am I actually saying something and not realizing it? He has stopped gaming midstream to come find me, aggravated that I'm calling him when I literally haven't said a word. Every time I tell him that I didn't say his name, he gets this confused look, like he's trying to read my face to see if I'm telling him the truth. Yesterday was the turning point. I was laying in bed reading, and he threw a bottle of water on the bed next to me. I asked him why he brought me a bottle of water, and he said, "Do you not remember asking me for water?" I told him no, and pointed to a bottle of water on the nightstand that I brought to bed when I laid down. He said, "You literally just yelled down for me to bring you a cold bottle of water." I explained to him that I did not say that, because I had my own cold water that I brought to bed. We both agreed that something really strange is happening, because this has just started within last month. And I don't know if this is my entity that has followed me just now becoming vocal, or if this is something new. We are both on sound mind, and neither of us have any sort of mental issue that we are aware of that would have me speaking without knowing it, or him hearing things. Aside from extreme annoyance, is there a real cause for concern? Thank you TechnoCloud Mao 5, the author. Entity attacking ex-girlfriends. Okay, just for context, this all happened in my parents' house. They built this house brand new in an estate, so obviously no one else has lived in here before us. In saying that, the land this estate was built on, there was a syphilis hospital in First World War. Now, there have been a lot of paranormal encounters in the house, but I'm going to focus on what happened to my ex-girlfriends. Our family has always joked there is a spirit in the house that has a thing for me because of these encounters. First girlfriend Mel. So me and this girl had a terrible relationship. We were both young and it was super toxic. Anyway, one night I wake up to her screaming next to me, and I mean screaming. It took me about 20 minutes to calm her down. After she calmed down, she told me she woke up to something running up the stairs. My room was the attic single room upstairs, so she heard something running up the stairs, and as it turned the stairs, she described it as a devil baby. Greeny black skin rotting off, razor sharp teeth, and red eyes. She said it ran straight up the stairs and jumped on her, attacking her. Second girlfriend Tess. Hers wasn't too bad in comparison. I woke up to her shaking me awake, yelling at me. She said she was lying on her phone while I was asleep, and all of a sudden something was yelling directly in her face to get out repeatedly, but she didn't physically see anything. Third girlfriend Brooke. Hers was actually really positive, and I chalk it up to her being a good person. She was also religious, so maybe that helped. One night, she wakes up and said she saw the huge bright white light overlooking us in bed. She told me the next morning. For me personally, I've had one encounter where there was no doubt in my mind it happened. I was going through a shitty time in life, lying in bed, trying to sleep. All of a sudden, I feel pure peace and protection come over me. It was such a strange feeling. Then, I feel what feels like someone rubbing their fingers through my hair. I remember thinking, am I imagining this? But I could hear my hair moving across my pillow as the fingers ran through my hair. This lasted for about 20 minutes, then slowly drifted away. I opened my eyes, nothing there. Anyway, that's all for now. Might type some other experiences up later. Thank you, HobToeJam, the author. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you already haven't, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any new episodes. See you again soon, and until then, please be safe.